Today's subject is America's eternal sweetheart, a woman whose smile defined the 1950s, whose voice soothed a war-torn generation, and whose screen presence made her the most beloved box office star of her time, Doris Day. She was the symbol of grace, the voice of innocence, and the image of optimism in a post-war America that desperately needed hope. This is the story of Doris Day and what happened to her only son, Terry Melcher. Terry Melcher, the son who chose silence. Terry was born on February 8, 1942 in Los Angeles, just as World War II was intensifying and America was learning how fragile its peace could be. His mother, Doris Day, was still in her early 20s, a small-town girl with a big voice, trying to make it in big band music. But the man she had married, Al Jordan, was no support. A jazz trombonist with deep insecurity and explosive violence, Al routinely beat Doris and once even held a gun to her head. When Terry was barely 3 months old, she fled with her infant son and never looked back. That decision saved both their lives, but it left Terry without a father and with a mother who was about to vanish into the machine of fame. Doris threw herself into her career. She had no other choice. With a baby to support and trauma to outrun, she toured constantly, sang on radio shows, and accepted any job that came her way. In 1946, she married George Weidler, a saxophonist who promised stability, but the marriage barely lasted 2 years. Weidler didn't want to raise a child who wasn't his, and Terry, just 4 years old, was again watching another man walk away. For much of his early childhood, Terry was raised by nannies and extended family, while Doris chased roles and paid debts. She loved him deeply. But love, when filtered through distance, often arrives quietly and leaves scars that never introduce themselves. By 1951, Doris had become a breakout film star and married her third husband, Martin Melcher. Martin was a Christian Scientist and a music executive, someone who seemed calm, pragmatic, and loyal. He legally adopted Terry, gave him the last name Melcher, and took full control of both Doris's professional contracts and family life. But behind the charm was something colder. Martin's idea of parenting was business structure. Terry would be groomed, polished, and controlled. No outbursts, no individuality, appear when requested, smile when expected. Terry spent his adolescence at elite private schools and photo shoots, never far from a camera, but always far from his mother. Doris, meanwhile, was America's sweetheart. In the 1950s alone, she starred in over a dozen films, recorded chart-topping albums, and became a national icon of idealized womanhood, all while her home was shaped by silence, emotional control, and a stepfather who saw family as an extension of brand management. For Terry, the message was clear. In this world, emotions were liabilities, and trust was currency easily stolen. By the early 1960s, Terry was in his 20s and had made a choice. If he couldn't control his childhood, he would control the sound of others. He joined Columbia Records and quickly became known for his sharp musical instinct. In 1964, he helped shape the emerging folk rock scene and co-produced the Byrds' debut album, Mr. Tambourine Man, which became a defining track of the era. He followed that with work for Paul Revere and the Raiders, and by 1965, he was considered one of the most promising producers in California. That same year, however, his world fractured again. Martin Melcher, the man who had raised him, dictated his schooling, and managed his mother's empire, died suddenly. What followed was a stunning betrayal. Doris discovered that Martin had squandered her multi-million-dollar fortune, signing contracts in her name without consent, and leaving her deeply in debt. Terry, just 23, was thrust into crisis mode. He stood by his mother as they filed lawsuits, exposed the fraud, and fought to regain her name. But the damage had already been done. For the second time in his life, Terry had watched a man his mother trusted destroy her. And both times, he had been just close enough to feel the collapse, but too young to stop it. That betrayal changed him permanently. From then on, he would keep everything, his career, his heart, his private world, behind a locked door. In 1968, Terry moved into a secluded rental on Cielo Drive, a quiet property in Benedict Canyon. Around that time, he met Charles Manson, who was then posing as a spiritual songwriter with dreams of recording an album. Manson believed Terry could launch his music career. Terry entertained the idea briefly, more out of politeness than belief, but ultimately declined. Manson didn't forget. In August 1969, after Terry had moved out, Manson's cult broke into that same house, now rented by actress Sharon Tate, and committed one of the most gruesome murders in American history. Though Terry wasn't the target, the message was unmistakable. Fame doesn't just attract adoration. It draws obsession. It creates enemies. From that point on, Terry withdrew almost entirely from the public eye. Through the 1970s and 80s, he continued to produce music, working again with the Beach Boys, composing television themes, and famously co-writing Kokomo in 1988. But he did it all from the shadows. He declined interviews. He refused red carpets. He didn't want anyone looking too closely. His one brief marriage in the 1970s to actress Melissa Egan ended quietly, and he never remarried. He had no children. Instead, he moved back near Doris, who had retired to Carmel Valley. Their relationship, once defined by distance, became something deeper, a quiet alliance of two survivors who had each been used, misled, and manipulated by the men and machines of fame. When Terry was diagnosed with melanoma in the late 1990s, he kept it private, even from some friends. He continued working, kept the door closed, and faced his final chapter the same way he had faced the rest, quietly, privately, and without complaint. He died on November 19, 2004, at age 62. Doris was crushed. She had outlived every man who betrayed her, every critic who tried to reduce her to a smile. But losing Terry was the one grief she never moved past. For the next 15 years, she lived in near total seclusion. No interviews, no red carpets, no image to uphold. When she passed away in 2019, her will requested no funeral, no public service, no final curtain call. Just like her son, she wanted to leave in peace. Today, Terry Melcher is remembered in fragments. A producer credit here, a chilling footnote in the Manson saga there. But his story is much bigger than that. He was the only son of one of Hollywood's brightest stars. He was a boy caught between stepfathers, studios, and scandals. And he was a man who saw what fame cost his mother and chose to build a life without it. His name is rarely spoken, but his silence still echoes. One son. He didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't cash in on her name. He didn't try to rewrite her legacy or outrun her shadow. Instead, Terry Melcher stood quietly behind the scenes while the world adored his mother and chose to carry the burden she never showed. Her fame gave him distance. Her pain gave him purpose. He lived in the silence between her songs and protected the woman behind the smile. He carried her betrayal, her resilience, and her reason to keep believing. If you found this breakdown powerful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives of Hollywood's forgotten children, subscribe to Legacy Uncovered. Your support brings these invisible stories to light. Thanks for listening.